Good evening. I hereby call to order the June 26th meeting of Mayfield Heights City Council. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. DeJohn. Mrs. Finney.
Here.
Mr. Mano.
Here.
Mr. Mercurio.
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Here.
Mrs. Snyder.
Here.
And Mrs. Tracy.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. We will now move on to acceptance of the minutes of our last meeting, June 12th, 2017. I hope everyone's had a chance to review the minutes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Are there any suggested changes, amendments, or deletions to the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of approval of the minutes of our June 12th meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes of our last meeting have been approved. We'll next move on to correspondence and announcements. Is there any member of council who has anything to share? I just would like to say that we're all very saddened by the death of our past councilman, Paul Sharia. Passed away over the weekend, and he will be missed. And we just with Mr. Newman were sitting here looking at his last comment he made at every meeting. Thank you for your time this time until next time. That's something we'll always remember. So our thoughts and prayers go out to his family. And it was a great Unity Days. I think everybody had a terrific time. It was run really well. We always want to thank our Park and Rec Commission and our Service Department for all the hard work, and our Police Department for being there for 3 solid days. It was, I think, a great success. I'm sure the mayor has something in his report for that. So we will now move on to reports of officers, and we'll begin with our mayor, Mayor DeSico.
Thank you. Paul must be here in spirit because you took part of my report.
Wait,
so
I'm sorry.
like I took his all the time.
At least he knows we're all thinking about him, not just you, as his funeral director.
Yeah. This past Friday, we did kick off our Unity Day celebration by welcoming the new Gold Resident class during our Gold Resident Luncheon at the Community Center. These are residents who have resided in our city for at least 50 years. 18 new Gold residents joined the 200 plus Gold residents already honored by our city. Andy Finaro and Steve Grano prepared a delicious lunch, and after lunch, names were drawn for door prizes. And I had a chance to speak to many of the residents who were there, and they did express their gratitude for being recognized. And in particular, I spoke to 3 residents who have called Mayfield Heights home for 95, 89, and 88 years respectively, which is pretty unbelievable. I think it says a lot about our community that many of our residents choose to call Mayfield Heights home for generations. And more on Unity Days, I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone who put so much time and effort into this year's event to make sure it was a success. Sean Ward, Nick Tagg, Patty Rogeliner, and the whole Parks and Rec staff, the Service Department crews who volunteered their time, the Police and Fire Department, the Parks and Rec Commission members, Renee Augustine, Tammy Kleins for manning our brand new social media tent, and all the volunteers in general. And Mr. Mano, I did get a call from Tony Filio. He wants to hire you to flip burgers, he told me. Except for a soggy Friday night, the weather did hold out. And I want to thank my mom for saying a prayer and lighting an extra candle. She told me she was going to do that for us. The bocce tournament and parade went off without a hitch, and Saturday evening's fireworks show was fantastic. I did receive numerous emails and calls stating how great they thought that the fireworks show was. Also, thanks to Coach Sam Retigliano for being our parade marshal. All in all, it was a great weekend. NOPEC has reached out to its member communities to share an important opportunity with eligible residents called the Energy Conservation for Ohioans program, EchoLink for short. It is designed to support Ohio homeowners in improving their energy efficiency. By lowering home improvement loan interest rates, this program eases the cost of energy efficiency improvements, including windows, roofs, doors, and new appliances, along with many other improvements. It is administered by the Office of the Ohio Treasury, and applicants must be Ohio residents, must own an existing home or condominium, and must receive approval for a qualifying loan through a participating bank. And applicants must use 50% of the loan for qualifying energy efficient products. And applicants can receive up to 3% interest rate reduction on bank loans for up to 7 years. The maximum loan amount in the interest rate reduction can be applied to is $50,000, and applications are being accepted on a rolling basis. So anyone interested, you can contact Norma Fox Horowitz at nfhorwitz@nopecinfo.org. NOPEC's resource development professionals will advise prospective applicants on the next steps. And we are going to, that's a mouthful, I know that whole paragraph there, but we are going to put that up on our social media and on our website so homeowners can get a chance to kind of dive into that a little bit more in depth. And last, but certainly not least, I too would like to announce the passing of former Councilman Paul Sharia. Paul's accomplishments were many: investigative reporter, founder of La Gazzetta Italiana newspaper, loving husband, father, and grandfather. But I think one of his greatest talents was his ability to give an amazing Public Works and Services Committee report. And I know we all miss his reports. There is a Mass for Paul tomorrow at St. Francis of Assisi Church at 11:30 a.m. And please keep Paul and his family in your prayers. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any questions for the mayor? Mr. Amano.
Just two things. Number one, putting the tagline in the obit was classy. That was really well done. And the other thing is, I'm not too happy with Mr. Nopek. I got a letter from Nopek comparing my electrical use with my neighbors, telling me that I use much more electricity than my neighbors do, and that I should go to their website and they will help me figure out how to use less electricity. I am not too happy with Mr. Nopek. It's none of his business. I mean, I don't understand. Is there a shortage of electricity? I mean, if we're paying for the electricity we're using, what the heck are they, what's this conserve business? You know,
Well, I'm not sure how they would get your exact numbers.
they did the same thing with water, from our bills, I guess. They did it with water too. Conserve the water, conserve the water. Then they raised the rates. Why? Because you're not using enough water. I mean, it's crazy. So Mr. Nopek and I are at odds. Thank you.
Point taken.
Any other questions or comments for the mayor? We'll next move on to a report from our Director of Law, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no report this evening, but I would request an executive session tonight after the public portion of the meeting to discuss pending or imminent litigation.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Murphy? We'll next move on to our report from our Director of Finance, Mr. Tribby.
All I can say is we did file the tax budget that was passed last meeting, and we received an acknowledgement that it was received. And that will enable us to levy taxes in the fall at no increase.
That's great. Thanks, Mr. Tribby. Any questions for Mr. Tribby? Thank you. We will next move on to reports of committees, commissions, and boards, and we'll start with our Building Committee, Mr. DeJohn, who is absent this evening. Mr. Mano, do you have anything to report?
I do not have a report.
Thank you. We'll move on to Finance and Audit Committee, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. Finance and Audit did not meet, so I do not have a report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mrs. Sabetta? We'll move on to our Legislative Committee, Mrs. Snyder.
Thank you, Madam President. The Legislative Committee met to go over Ordinance 2017-12 on indigent decedent policy. The committee recommended for the law director to make some changes, and we will schedule another meeting for further review. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mrs. Snyder? We'll move on to Public Works and Services Committee. Mr. Mercurio.
Thank you, Madam President. Just wanted to give a tip of the hat to the Service Department for all their hard work in getting the park ready for Unity Days. And I also did speak with Mr. Fernaro this afternoon. He has had a couple pre-construction meetings, and we can look for the our road program, the construction and crack sealing to begin sometime right after the 4th of July. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Mercurio. Are there any questions for Mr. Mercurio? We'll move on to our Recreation and Parks Committee. Mr. Mano.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This past weekend, we hosted our annual Unity Days Festival. Although we got off to a slow start this weekend due to the weather on Friday, we rebounded nicely and had a great showing on Saturday and Sunday. On Friday, we inducted 19 new 50-year gold residents at a luncheon with past inductees. Saturday was an eventful day. In addition to the carnival rides, food, and games, we had great entertainment and concluded the evening with fireworks. They were spectacular. They definitely were spectacular. Our parade on Sunday included former Browns coach Sam Ritigliano as our Grand Marshal and Tony Filio of Mayfield McDonald's, who has served our Mayfield Heights community for 56 plus years. We had many great groups participate. We also honored our 2017 Citizens of the Year, Cecilia and David Papanetti, with a small ceremony under the main tent. Cecilia served on our Park and Recreation Committee for 13 years, and David has been at her side helping at many events as well as being a parade marshal for many years. Both began serving as volunteers for our community in 1994 on the Oakville Park Committee. They have served our community in various ways for many years. Finally, we would like to thank all the workers, volunteers, and also our event sponsors. This huge city event, which brings together our community, could not happen without the help of so many individuals and organizations. Are you looking for another way to get the most out of your summer? Join us on July 14th for our drive-in frenzy. Food trucks from Barrio, Swenson's, and the Donut Lab will be on hand for dinner beginning at 6 p.m. The band Eastwind will be performing a free concert at 7 p.m. and we will be showing the movie Finding Dory at dusk. This will be a drive-in movie and will take place at City Park behind Dragapool. Concessions will be sold during the movie, and if you don't want to sit in your car to enjoy the movie, bring a blanket or chairs. Bring your dancing shoes for our next Silver Social Dance held on July 15th from 6:30 to 9 p.m. at the Ross John Community Center. Admission is $5 per person. Refreshments will be provided by Manor Care. For more information on any of our programs, please call the Recreation Department at 442-2627 or at mayfieldheights.org. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Mano? We'll move on to our Safety and Transportation Committee. Mrs. Finney.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mrs. Finney? We'll move on to Board of Zoning Appeals. Mr. Mercurio.
Thank you, Madam President. We have 3 items on tonight's agenda that we can address when they come up, and I do have one update regarding BZA case 1105. If you recall, we voted on that last meeting. This was the property at 5978 Edgewood, the house that was burned down, and there was some question as to whether or not the detached garage needed to be demolished as well. Mr. Jameson did get a chance to go out there and inspect the garage. The garage does not need to be demolished. However, some upgrades need to be corrected. That includes bringing it up to, bring all the electrical up to the 2014 electrical code. They need to scrape and paint the garage and replace all deteriorated exterior wood and sheathing, and also gutters and downspouts need to be installed or reinstalled. So I just wanted to give everyone an update on that. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Mercurio. Are there any questions for Mr. Mercurio? We'll move on to our Planning Commission, and that's Mr. DeJohn. we do have one item on the agenda that went before planning, which we will discuss when it comes before us. Oh, you can. Go ahead, Mayor.
Okay. No,
Speak.
yeah.
Speak.
Yeah, it was, that is on the agenda, and be happy to answer any questions. I hope everybody got the minutes and the drawings from that, because it's pretty cut and dry, I think. So, be happy to answer any questions when that time comes.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, we will now move on to our public portion. Pursuant to Section 121.02, subsection H8 of the codified ordinances, each person will be allowed 5 minutes to speak, with a maximum of 30 minutes for the entire public portion. Although this is not a time for public debate, it is your opportunity to address council with any of your concerns. Please note that there will be no personal attacks or comments allowed. If you are here in connection with an agenda item, this is your opportunity to address council. So if you would like to be heard this evening, please raise your hand and be recognized. Step forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record. It is now 7:15 and we will open the public portion. Is there anyone that would like to be heard? Yes, sir. Please come forward to the podium, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Marshall Pickus. My address is 1227 Genesee Avenue. And I'm here to speak about the fence in my yard. I requested a variance on to have a solid wood fence as opposed to a board-on-board fence or a vinyl fence. And I just wanted to make a couple remarks. The reason I wanted the privacy fence was because my fiance has young children who are autistic, so I wanted a safe place for them to play in my yard when they come over. I did get a fence company to come out to my yard, and they gave me an estimate to replace the fence entirely with a board-on-board fence, and the estimate was $1,864. I do understand that when the when the commission board came out, they did look at my fence, and there are some boards on it that are warped, and I am willing to replace those and fix the fence to make it look good. However, I'm not sure why a solid vinyl fence would be okay, but a solid wood fence would not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pickus. Is there anyone else this evening that would like to be heard? Yes, gentlemen, please step forward, state your name and address for the record.
Tony Kristoff. I have a house at 1514 Woodrow Avenue, purchased in 1992. Yeah, and we purchased it as a double home. It was renovated into a double. It was the first house I bought. I didn't know the total process, so we ended up purchasing it. We bought it from the homeowner, and it went through his lawyer, so it never got an inspection, and I guess it's zoned single family. So I just wanted to get a variance on that. So,
And you went before the BZA to request that variance?
yeah.
Thank you. Is there anyone else this evening that would like to be heard? It is now 7:18 and we will close the public portion. And we'll move on to our resolutions. And we'll begin with Resolution 2017-37, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Resolution number 2017-37, a resolution confirming the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in denying the Charles Parator, 1260 Elmwood Road, a variance to construct a new storage shed on the property, Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 861-11087. larger than that allowed by the codified ordinances. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mrs. Finney, seconded by Mr. Mercurio. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. The applicant went before BZA to request a variance to build a shed on his property that was larger than what is allowed. The variance was unanimously denied by BZA. Mr. Mercurio, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I spoke to the building director prior to tonight's meeting, and the applicant has agreed to modify his shed so that it does conform with our ordinances. So the building department is going to go ahead and issue a permit. So I would recommend everyone voting in favor of the BZA's decision in denying the request, and then he'll go ahead and issue the permit, and the shed will be built that is conforms with our ordinance.
May I ask why the building department didn't talk to the applicant before it got to council?
That I don't know. I just found out before the meeting.
Okay, I didn't know if there was a reason that it wasn't.
Yeah, I'm not sure when Mr. Jameson had spoke to the applicant.
Okay, so you'd like us all to agree with the denial?
Agree with the denial, and then he'll go ahead and build a shed that is conforming.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes. Resolution 2017-37 has been approved. We'll move on to Resolution 2017-38. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Resolution number 2017-38, a resolution confirming the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in denying to Marshall Pickus, 1227 Genesee Avenue, a variance to erect a solid wooden fence between the house and the garage of the property. Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 862-03-013. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mrs. Finney. Seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Again, this case went before BZA. The applicant requested a variance to erect this fence. Started erecting in 2015. Apparently it is a solid fence instead of board on board, and in the interim we had changed the fence ordinance, which has changed the type of material you can use to have for your fence. Mr. Mercurio, would you like to add anything to this?
I think you pretty much summed it all up. Just to add that he did get a permit for a board on board almost 2 years ago in 2015, and then the fence that was eventually built was a wood solid fence, which is no longer allowed.
And was there any way that fence could have been repaired?
I think it's in bad shape, to be honest with you.
And the vote was unanimously
Unanimous.
denied. And Mr. Mano?
One question. Joe, is there an age limit on, or time limit when you take out a permit to do something, to construct?
There's not, and I just talked to Mr. Jameson prior to the meeting that maybe we should put a 6-month expiration on those,
That
but
would
there
seem to be a
is
good
not.
idea. Yeah, okay, thank you.
And is there, I guess I can ask the law director, is there anything about grandfathering in once you've received a permit?
I'm sorry, I was chatting on this side. What was the question?
Question was, is there the opportunity to grandfathered in once you've received the permit to, to, you know, erect a fence, and then the ordinance was changed, you know, when Mrs. Sabetta came to us and said, let's change the ordinance.
Conceivably, but
taken
the
his
original permit was for,
It's for a board on board.
was for a board on board, and then he constructed a solid fence, so he wasn't even building what
What he said he was
the
gonna build.
permit was for. So that would eliminate any idea that it would be grandfathered.
Thank you. Mrs. Snyder?
Ask the applicant why he did that.
Mr. Pickett, can you come back to the podium, please? Mrs. Snyder is asking why you built a solid fence instead of the board on board.
Was there a reason that you might have changed it in the year? or two?
Yes. Originally, my neighbor was assisting me, or my neighbor's friend was assisting me with the fence. And after we put the posts in, he basically disappeared on me. So he was no longer assisting me. That was back in that was what went in 2015 when we got the permit. And a year later, my girlfriend's father said he would help me put the fence up. But when he looked at the posts that were put in, he told me that the posts were too short and too far apart to support a board-on-board fence. So that's why we put the solid fence at the time. And now that I'm looking at it, I'm seeing that that's one of the reasons that the posts are, that the wood is starting to warp a little bit. So I'm gonna have to do some repairs to it.
And I believe part of the fence that, along the back is backwards. Also, the good side of the fence is supposed to face the neighbor's property. Did I say that correctly? Yes.
That's correct.
I did.
The small 5-foot section?
Yeah, and I think that's in the reverse as well. Did someone come out and inspect this fence after it was put up
They inspected the posts.
and didn't come back to tell
They-
you that it was put, that,
They did not inspect those.
because I noticed when I came out to look that it was put up backwards. And I would have thought if it was inspected, somebody would have caught that, since I don't know as much about fences as our building department.
Right, yeah, on the other side, I only had the little 5-foot section put up. The rest of it was my neighbor's fence.
Mr. Jameson? Can you come up to the podium so we can hear you? Thank you. And do you think that it can be repaired? The boards that are warped and,
You'd have to put a board-on-board fence in. I mean, there's no, all the fence ordinance changes, the only kind of privacy fence or solid fence you can have is a 6-foot vinyl.
final?
So, it was approved originally for 6-foot board-on-board.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Did not his permit expire?
Well,
He-
there's no expiration dates on permits. There is, however, when you do receive a permit, there's a time that the work has to start within 6 months. There's nothing that says the permit was. So his permit for a board on board, I told Mr. Pickens, still would honor that. That's not what he did.
Thank you.
The-
And
Wait,
that-
Oh, Mrs. Sabetta, you have something else?
The part that that is on the side, that is solid fence, is that a gate that's backwards? Or is that the fence that is backwards? There's two pieces when you face the house, one in the front of the house that's backwards, and one on the side of the house.
I think it's the gate that's backwards.
And in the front of the house, I think what Mrs. Tracy was speaking of, and I heard at the BZA meeting, is also backwards,
That's also in the back of the house, but that's on the opposite side.
correct? And you put that up?
Yes, with my girlfriend's father.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. So if you are going to, so I was going to say, if you agree with the vote of BZA in denying this variance, you will vote yes. If you feel you would like to reverse or modify the BZA vote, you will vote no. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes. The resolution 2017-38 has been adopted. We will now move on to resolution 2017-39. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Resolution number 2017-39, a resolution confirming the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in denying to Anthony Christoph and Robert Christoph, 1514 Woodrow Avenue, a variance to permit a two-family dwelling in a U1 district. Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 863-07-093. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mrs. Finney, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Finney. This applicant again went before BZA requesting a variance to allow a single-family home to be a two-family home in a U1 single-family district. The application was denied at BZA, and I believe it was a unanimous vote as well. Mr. Mercurio?
Correct.
Anything else?
We just felt the building department acted in the right manner, and they want to continue to rent this out as a two-family, that they should probably request that his property be rezoned to a U2.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion? Roll call on the motion to approve. Again, if you're going to agree with denying the vote of BZA, you will vote yes. And if you feel you'd like to reverse or modify the BZA vote, you will vote no. Now we'll have a roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes. Resolution 2017-39 has been approved. We'll move on to resolution 2017-40. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Resolution 2017-40, a resolution approving final payment in the amount of $38,080 to Park Hill Roofing for the replacement of the roof on the Ross C. DeJohn Community Center and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Finney. Last year, we adopted Resolution 2016-82, authorizing a new roof at the community building in the amount of $29,980. The new roof did not include replacing the area over the kitchen or the front entrance, but the new roof did include ice guard, all gutter perimeter with synthetic felt and landmark dimension shingles. This resolution is to approve the additional amount for the plywood, which we did not include in the initial resolution. That amount is $2,160 plus the vent, correct? Yeah, I didn't get that.
The plywood was in the original resolution.
There, yeah,
Well, the 132, yeah.
right. There were 140 some sheets of plywood, I believe. Am I correct? It was, there were
I believe it was
132
132.
There were 132 sheets, and it came out to like, you know, I figured it out, $1,590 or something, and then there was a vent to put in. Is there any other discussion? Mr. Tribby.
I was trying to get your attention there.
I'm
You
sorry.
were looking the wrong direction. No, all kidding aside, you did approve the $45 per sheet, and there were 132, and that total cost was $59.40. So even though you didn't know the amount, you did approve the $45 unit price. The only thing that was really not included in the quote was the need to install a intake vent, and that's $21.60. That's really the only extra cost in this whole project.
Because when we approved it initially, we knew we would have to replace the plywood. We just didn't
Correct.
know how many sheets we would have to replace.
And therefore,
at
you
that
could not
point.
approve a lump sum amount or any amount because it was unknown.
Right. There was a vent, though. If you looked at the contract, there was a vent that was it said all venting. I don't know if that's the same as an intake vent.
I think this is a special type of vent that had to be put in at some location on the roof, and that's why there's an extra charge for that.
Thank you, Mr. Tribby. Any other discussion or questions? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes. Resolution 2017-40 has been approved. We'll move on now to our ordinance 2017-15. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ordinance number 2017-15, an ordinance accepting a dedication plat for Phase 2 of Hidden Woods Trail in the city of Mayfield Heights and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mrs. Finney, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. The ordinance is requesting council's approval for the dedication of the street Hidden Woods Trail for public use. The plat was approved by our city engineer on April 3rd, 2013. Mr. Murphy, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I would. Hidden Woods Trail was built in 2 phases. The first phase ran from Som Center Road, I'm not sure how far, but to a distance, and it's attached to the legislation. It shows where there was a cul-de-sac at the end of Phase 1, and apparently additional property, and that was dedicated to public use, the roadway. Apparently there was then additional property that was bought, so the road was extended and swerved to the south along the freeway, and that dedication was never approved by council. The plat was approved by council, but the dedication of the roadway to public use was never approved, so this legislation will act as that approval.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Are there any other questions for Mr. Murphy or any other discussion? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Mercurio?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes. Ordinance 2017-15 has been approved. We will now move to motions. We'll go to our first motion. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Motion to confirm the decision of the Planning Commission approving a revised final site plan for the new 5,650 square foot Leedy Medical Office Building at 2060 Lander Road.
Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Mrs. Finney, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. The new final site plan was submitted and approved by planning for 5,650 square feet medical office building. But I just have a couple questions. I'm a little confused. The application says that the new construction is 5,600 plus or minus square feet. The letter submitted to Mr. Jameson on June 15th said the preliminary building was 5,550 square feet, and the revised final site plan is now 5,650 square feet. Yet the final site plan you submitted says 5,465 square feet. So what is the final, Mayor?
I asked that
Any-
question at the planning meeting, and it's 5,650 square feet.
And how was it that we couldn't get that one number on all the documents?
You want to ask the applicant?
I'm Bob Papato with Atwell, civil engineers for the site. The 5465 was the initial plan from last June, from June 2016. And then the site plan we submitted this year, the architect was not finished with the final footprint when we submitted the plan, but we indicated 5,700 plus or minus on the site plan. When we finally got the right number, it was 5,650, so I apologize for the confusion.
Yeah, it was just a little, I mean, trying to
Understood.
look at everything. And then I noticed that on the plan, even though I kind of blew it up a little bit, but I noticed that you're taking out 3 of the pine trees that are near the ingress and egress on Landerbrook Drive. And that leaves like 9 honey locust trees. What are you putting on the south side of the property? Because you have that vacant space where you can build in the future, but then we have residential next to that. Am I correct?
No.
No. Isn't that the Agresta house? Which would be next
Oh, yeah,
to-
you're right, there is,
Yeah.
yeah, right. Well,
Mayor.
there's a house there.
Yeah, there is
I
a house
forgot
there.
that.
There is a house there.
But if you,
And we
Madam,
said they did not have to build a masonry wall, but.
Right.
But
and
will you-
the landscape architect will review the landscape. He has to do that yet, yeah.
Okay, because it didn't appear that there was much of a buffer there.
Correct. On this plan, we wouldn't show it. On our improvement plans, we would prepare a full landscape plan that would show everything.
And I also see that you proposed a monument sign that's closer to the south side of your property. Since you've combined those 2 parcels, you'll have one parcel, you'll get one monument sign. So just, I mean, you realize that it's at the south end of your property.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments or discussion or questions? Thank you, sir. I appreciate your responses.
Madam President?
Mayor?
Just to note that it was in the minutes, TMS did note that the left turn lane must be extended to 125 feet. The applicant is going to do that. That's all approved. And Doug Woods has submitted his final written report accepting it, along with fire has accepted it also. So just want to give you an update.
Thank you. I read that also. and watched it narrow into that. Do you have any dates or anticipated date on when you would be building that expansion building? Any other discussion or comments or questions?
I just had a real quick question. So the signage that I'm seeing is on the front of the facing Lander Road, so they will not have any signage off of Lander Road. Is that correct?
They have one
If
monument
they
sign.
wanted to come in, they'd have to get a variance for that. Okay, thank you.
Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder,
Yes?
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes, this motion has been carried. We'll move on to our second motion. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Motion to authorize the sale of vehicles through govdeals.com. The vehicle is a 2009 Ford Fusion.
Do I have
Can I
a,
read the number?
do I have a motion to approve? I didn't want to interrupt you. I didn't know if you were going to or not.
Sorry about
Didn't want to interrupt.
Make me read it.
Do I have a motion to, Mr. Tribby?
Just thought you'd like to know the mileage on this vehicle is 111,075. So I think it's time to sell.
And who has been driving this vehicle?
This is a fire department vehicle, a non-emergency vehicle. It's been used well over the many years, but it's time.
It's time. Okay, thank you. Now do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Mrs. Snyder, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Any other discussion? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Snyder,
Yes?
Mrs. Finney.
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes, this motion has been carried. We will now move on to new business or comments from council. Is there any new business? Mr.
I have
Mano?
a question, on the matter of the two-family home in a one-family district. What is the time frame for having that second house, if you will, dismantled? How's that gonna be handled, do you know? I mean, is there a time frame to have that done? Mr. Jameson?
Mr. Jameson, you should sit in the front row.
That has to happen right away. That has to happen immediately, and they're aware of it. They have two gas meters, two water meters, two electrical meters. It's gotta go back to a one-family home. As it was just an empty room up there, and they changed it.
That will be monitored by the building department?
Yes.
Until it's completed?
Right.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. Mayor?
I just wanted to, you may see, mention that you may see Paul Getz walking around here. Friday's his last day, so when you see him,
No, we're all very sad about that.
wish him well. I think he's got a little more bounce in his step this week. He's like a horse headed for the barn, you know, so.
No, he was smiling when we walked in, but we're gonna miss him, because he is a bright spot for all of us. So, before we make a motion to go into executive session, everyone should remember tonight is our last of our normal season of council meetings. We'll be on summer recess. If there is something that comes up in July or August, we will have a specially scheduled council meeting. In July, it would be July 17, and in August, it would be August 21st. Just so everyone knows, it'll be in council chambers. It would probably be at 7 p.m. If we don't have anything that's of dire need, we won't have a meeting. So I just wanted everybody to be aware of that and to be updated. Mayor, you want to say something?
I think there's a BZA special meeting, so you're gonna
Is that what you were?
you're gonna have a meeting.
We're going to have a meeting, and it's
Yeah,
going to be
there's a-
July 17. How's that?
The, Madam Chairman,
Yes.
the BZA meeting is Monday, July 10th at 7 PM. There's 3 items on that agenda that evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mercurio. We'll all be here for the, Mr. Trivy.
You'll also be accepting bids for rock salt for winter. So if it's really hot that day, that'll make you psychologically cool
We're
off.
not going to do that. We're not going to talk about rock salt on a sunny day.
If you don't, then Joe's not gonna be able to buy salt, so you, you need to meet.
Oh, no. Okay, all right. Doing that. Do I have a motion to move into executive session at this time for pending and imminent litigation? Moved by Mrs. Snyder, seconded by Mr. Mercurio. Roll call on the motion.
Mrs. Spinney,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Mercurio.
Yes.
Mrs. Tracy.
Yes. The motion has been moved and seconded, and we will now move into executive session at 7:51 PM.